That was brilliant. Thank you so much. I mean, I'm personally so inspired of what we can accomplish with synthetic biology, bringing so many disparate parts of our country together through science. I would love to see more of that. So I actually want to introduce now our next panel, and I want to introduce my co-host, who you know very well, Christine Gould, the CEO and founder of Thought for Food. She is going to be chairing this next panel, which is Beyond Plants, the Third Agricultural Revolution. We have just been eating the plants that we can domesticate. And now the question is, what happens when we can go beyond that? So to answer these questions, please welcome to the stage Eben, the CEO of My Forest Foods, Lisa Dyson, the CEO of Air Protein, and Mike Leonard, the CTO of Motif FoodWorks.
It's the same company. We rebranded about 6 months ago.
Hey everyone, it's such a pleasure to be here with this incredible panel. I do have to share a story. I've been coming to SynBioBeta, as it used to be called, now Build with Biology, since it started. And actually, you were one of the first speakers, Eben, that I saw on stage. And now, look at it's come full circle. I'm here sharing a stage with you. And it's an incredible feeling. And also to see all of the progress, that you've made since Ecovative. And now here to talk about your new product, which is the holy grail, of course, of what we're looking for when it comes to delicious foods that are in the alternative protein space, and that's bacon.
Yeah.
So we're gonna get to that in a minute. It's really also great to be here with Lisa and Mike, who I've had the pleasure also of being on some virtual panels with over the past couple of years. So here we are to talk about Beyond Plants. We've already talked about Beyond Burgers, but now we're entering into a future where actually we don't really need plants to get us the foods that we need. And what does that future look like? What does that future taste like? And before we dive into the discussion, I just want to remind everyone how important our food systems really are. Our food systems are at the core of all 17 of our Sustainable Development Goals. They are, deeply affected by climate change. They are affecting climate change as one of the most significant contributors to GHG emissions. And as we've, seen and experienced with the current supply chain disruptions, our food systems are very fragile. First, as a result of, the COVID-19 restrictions, and now, of course, due to conflicts. And those types of challenges will increase in their urgency and importance as we, go forward with all of the pressures of climate change. And so with that in mind, we have been exploring over the past few years the possibilities of alternative proteins. And it's been really exciting to see plant-based proteins entering this space as a new sustainable alternative to some of the previous ways or some of the current ways that we are getting the protein that we need for nutrition from livestock. But plant-based proteins aren't perfect themselves. They're great, but of course they bring with them some challenges around monocropping and monocultures. And so it's always great, and that's one of the reasons I love this conference so much, to be asking ourselves what's possible? What if we could do more? And here we have speakers that are actually pushing the frontiers of what's possible in a world beyond plants. So let's dive into it. I'm going to ask each of you to tell me a little bit about what you're working on and why it is important. So Lisa, over to you with Air Protein.
Awesome. So wonderful to be here and good to be out in the world again. So at Air Protein, we are focused on making protein and products, specifically meat, with zero land. And so the process really begins with cultures that use CO2 and we use electricity, essentially to split water and create hydrogen and feed that into our process. And then it's a way of making protein and then meat using zero land. And the process itself actually turns out to be carbon negative from cradle to gate. And so it's a way of addressing this climate change impact of the food system that we have today and bringing on a carbon negative way of producing.
Amazing. Eben.
And I'll just say I'm very happy to be sharing a stage with you. We're using mycelium to grow delicious whole-cut plant-based meats. So Most of the products on the market are ground meat, but most of the market by size and volume is whole cuts of meat. So we're growing delicious whole cuts of meat, and we started with bacon, and our first product is called My Bacon. And if anyone wants to taste any, we're going to have an unofficial tasting at our booth. It's the booth with the big screen directly after this.
All right, thanks, Christine, for having us, and great to see everybody here. This is my first time at this conference in person. I've spent the last couple years looking at all of you in 2D, so it's great to be here. So at Motif FoodWorks, we're here to create the ingredients that enable plant-based foods to be truly craveable. And we do that using synthetic biology as a key tool in developing that portfolio. So think about ingredients that make plant-based meat and plant-based dairy truly taste and feel the way that you expect. So that toolbox isn't limited to just mimicking meat and dairy and other existing applications. We're seeing the promise of synthetic biology and precision fermentation in general to help enable food forms we haven't even thought of yet, and I'm sure some of the discussion today will focus on new types of foundations for food that are going to need the same types of tools that we're developing for plant-based meat and dairy. So real pleasure to be here.
Yeah, amazing. And we're definitely going to dive into that. Whenever I'm describing your company externally to people, I'm like, they're the Willy Wonka of food. I mean, you're exploring all of the exciting possibilities. So I do want to double down a little bit on each of you and your unique kind of draw into the sector and your founder's story. It's actually pretty incredible to think about how you got into this space. Reminder, the most important sector there is food and agriculture. But Lisa, yeah, how did you get into Air Protein and come about your company?
Well, absolutely. So I'm a scientist by training. My PhD's in physics, but my dad was an entrepreneur, and so he at some point was the president of a chain of 55 hair salons. So that got me interested in business and led me to the Boston Consulting Group. Kind of that was my original trajectory. But it was in 2005 when I went to New Orleans after Hurricane Katrina hit and just saw the devastation of a huge weather event. And it became really real to me that climate scientists have been telling us that these weather events are going to become more intense and more frequent, and just how that affects people's lives now. And so I wanted to be a part of the solution, and myself and a colleague that I knew back in grad school, Dr. John Reed, we started a company, Converti, really focused on trying to build climate-friendly solutions. And then eventually we realized if we want to have an impact on climate change, we have to look at how we eat. Since, of course, it emits more greenhouse gases, the sector, than the entire transportation sector. And so we started Air Protein to really attack that problem, and in particular to focus on the biggest culprit, of course, as we all know, which is meat. And so we make air meat. Air chicken is where we started. In 2019, we made the world's first air-based meat, is what we call it. And we've been building from there.
And you've been leveraging NASA technology, correct?
Yeah, back in the 60s and 70s, NASA scientists were trying to figure out how to go on a long space journey and feed the astronauts. Right now, it takes 2 years to make a steak, and that's not going to cut it, right? So, they looked at ways to make food efficiently and using minimal space, minimal resources very quickly. And one of the solutions, we've leveraged to now create a whole new technology that's commercializable. Unfortunately, we haven't been to Mars or a distant planet, so they pretty much put that on the shelf. And so we picked it up and happily are now standing on the shoulders of giants.
Space-age technology for Spaceship Earth. It's an amazing story.
Right.
Yes. So how about you? What's your founder's story? How did you go from biomaterials into, food?
We're going to maybe rewind the clock a little farther. So okay. I was born in Vermont on a farm, and we raised pigs, we raised chickens, we made maple syrup, we raised cows, and when I was 18, I couldn't wait to get off the farm, get as far away from the food system as possible. I never wanted to hear about it again. Went to RPI and I started a company, innovating, which used mycelium as a material. So looking at mushrooms not actually as food, but as a material and material science lens. We went on to develop a packaging material, mushroom packaging, which is produced globally. It displaces styrofoam, leather-like materials, building construction. And about 4 or 5 years ago, I found myself sucked back into the food world around some of the environmental challenges. We always want to work on the biggest problems facing Spaceship Earth. And I realized my understanding of the industrial food system was totally wrong. I had this idyllic memory as a child of how food was grown, and it was just totally wrong. I'd been blind to sort of the sustainability impacts or the sort of carrying cost on Spaceship Earth. And so that brought us full circle in looking at mycelium as a material for food and what was the problem it could solve in this space, which was how do you make a really delicious whole cut of meat that's super scalable and could reach hundreds of millions or billions of pounds in a short period of time. That's how I got back into the food system.
That's amazing. Actually, I have a parallel story. I grew up on a farm, but in Illinois, in the middle of the Corn Belt, and same thing. I was like, get me out of here. I want nothing to do with food. And here I am back running Thought for Food. So there is a draw. Exactly. If you want to change the world, actually, like food and agriculture is the place to do it. It has such an impact on so many people and so many issues. And how about you? You're CTO at Motif. So how did you get into the space?
Yeah, this is going to sound familiar. My background's also in chemistry and materials science. I've spent my whole career in the food industry, but I've always looked at food and food challenges through a material science lens from a functionality standpoint, right? I mean, food is one of the most emotional and intimate things we experience as human beings, both individually and in a community. But there are real science and engineering challenges that require that kind of background to solve. So that's what drew me to the industry. After 20 years, I realized that the best growth potential and the best way to make a difference for society is to really get into plant-based. And so when the opportunity came to join Motif, it was really a no-brainer for me. Motif was spun out in 2018 by our friends at Ginkgo. And I think that the mission and idea behind Motif, it still stands today. I mean, we're here to help do more with less from an environmental standpoint, but also develop technologies that can truly make plant-based foods craveable. The number one barrier to scale in this industry, we believe, is taste.
Yes.
If these products don't taste superior, don't have their own experiences that people really go for, we have no hope of realizing the sustainability and societal benefits that we all signed up for when we adopted a plant-based lifestyle. So it was really an easy mission to get behind and sign up for. And so yeah, we've grown the company since then to include more technologies. So SynBio is a foundation, but we also have other technologies to develop ingredients to help flavor and texture, and to do food design as well. So finished products that really demonstrate how this technology works and makes a difference.
I mean, that's such an important point. And I've actually worked with John McIntyre before, your CEO, and I know that that is a big point he always raises, is that, you know, in order to facilitate this transition to more sustainable proteins, we need to focus on taste and texture. And so can you tell us, like, a little bit, what is an average day like at Motif? I mean, I told you, I describe it as kind of the Willy Wonka of, you know, food. So tell us, like, how are you innovating? What are some of the things that you're doing to create new food experiences?
Sure. Well, we talk about ourselves as an ingredient company. If you think about the business that we're in, we're just starting up the commercial ramp now. We just launched our first product. It's called Himami. It's a bovine myoglobin, that the same type of protein that you find in beef muscle, but we make it with yeast. And it really improves the flavor and aroma of plant-based meat. So, okay, that's a really game-changing ingredient, we think. But it's not enough to just stop at an ingredient. This is food. It's a complex system. You can't just drop this thing in to a burger or to a sausage and have it work, right? You actually have to solve a higher dimensional problem of food design and the hierarchical, you know, sort of nature of how that works. So, you know, a day at Motif is all about solving the whole problem. It's not just about the ingredient challenge to meet. It's about analyzing, discovering, designing things differently so that we can solve the entire problem and not just come up with drop-in solutions. Because at the end of the day, taste is the number one thing, but if you want folks who can help you scale, you have to make your ingredients easy to use. You have to show them the science, and that's something we're developing, not just by ourselves, but with an ecosystem of partners that we've signed up for. I was employee number 12 at Motif. We had not a lot of people when we started, so we were very aggressive at recruiting really an innovation ecosystem, partnerships with universities like University of Queensland, Imperial College, King's College of London, doing research in materials science and engineering, oral processing physics, to help us put all the pieces together to figure out how to design food and to tailor ingredients that can really improve the eating experience.
That's super exciting. So are you working like with chefs and food designers and
Absolutely.
spaces?
We've got those skill sets on staff. We've got a team, a very multidisciplinary team. If you walked into Motif today, you'd find process engineers, you'd find food scientists, culinary scientists, bioprocess engineers, synthetic biologists, sensory people. It's truly an interdisciplinary team that can solve pretty much any problem from any angle. And consumer problems are some of the most interesting problems to solve, and you have to bring that kind of horsepower to the table if you want to make progress.
Yeah, so fascinating. And as I mentioned, you have the first product, which is like, to me, the holy grail. If you can crack bacon and, you know, you've won over consumers. So tell us about like the taste and flavor and texture of the products you're bringing to market. How's the reception been?
Really great. I would just echo the comment that like taste is everything. Our board member, Stephen McDonald, like beat that into me. He started Applegate, a bacon company, and it's like, it's all about the taste. It's all about the taste. So The two things we're combining are actually kind of standard flavor systems from the industry, but we don't require a lot of flavor systems because our secret is we rely on what the mushrooms we're using already do. So we're taking actually gourmet mushrooms, not the kind that you'd see in the supermarket. They're kind of usually foraged in the woods. And we found a way to grow these in sort of an industrial format while preserving that fully grown structure of the mushroom. So we take a mushroom like chicken of the woods, but we grow a 50-foot slab of it. And we slice that up to make the bacon. And because it's basically just that same mushroom you'd find in nature, it's got umami flavor in it. It's got the textural elements we're really looking for that are very meat-like. In this case, when you fry it, you get crispy sections and less crispy. And then we're really only adding a couple ingredients: salt, sugar, smoke, natural flavors, and a little coconut fat so it crisps up nicely. So we really rely on the mycelium to do most of our work.
That's amazing. Mycelium is so incredible. I actually don't know if you saw, but the Financial Times just did an article a couple of days ago about the fascinating world of fungi. And it really is, like, it's just mind-boggling, all of the possibilities there. So
Mushrooms are having a moment.
mushrooms are having a moment. There's mushroom for mushrooms. Lisa, now I need to understand air chicken. What is that and how does it taste?
Well, I'm biased, of course. I, of course, say that it tastes good, but other people have as well. So, it's just, we start off with our process to make our air protein flour, and then we apply culinary techniques, different ways of getting to the textures that you're looking for and flavors, and then we make something that tastes like chicken, and we call it air chicken.
Air chicken. So
Yeah.
is it like lower in calories?
Well, we do aim to achieve nutritional targets as well. So it's lower salt content, no cholesterol. It's the protein that we start with has all the essential amino acids. It's a complete protein, and it has bioavailable vitamins, bioavailable minerals, B vitamins, and those types of things. So we focus on nutrition as well. And so we've done more than chicken. We're in the seafood area as well, as an example. So we've made air halibut. Yeah. And air scallops as well. So, and we have beef and pork in the development pipeline.
But you're hitting on a really, really important point, and it's actually, been a source of criticism a little bit around the whole kind of plant-based space and alternative protein space has been nutrition. Actually, there's some concerns that while this might be more environmentally sustainable, are we actually delivering the micronutrients and vitamins that are required for human nutrition? So you have been taking that into consideration from the get-go, it sounds like, in designing your products.
We do. There's three things we're looking for. Definitely taste is critical,
yeah.
texture, and nutrition. So, nutrition is kind of at the core of what we're doing. And as we look at our products that we're building, the challenge to the product development team is to make sure that we're delivering nutritious, healthy products.
And we can go beyond nutrition. I mean, if in fact that would be an amazing goal, would be to actually make chicken even healthier, than what is currently available. I actually have spent, a large part of my career in agriculture, and actually, there's a lot of variability around like the meat, if you will, that is offered in the traditional industry because of what chickens eat, and the feedstocks that they're given. And so there, if this can be solved and we can go beyond with, even better meats that are higher nutrition, more sustainable, more tasty, this is, an incredible future that we have the chance to build. So what about you? Are you also factoring in nutrition into the work you're doing?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think second in line behind taste, nutrition is going to come up in consumers' minds as a real imperative. I think today you're starting to see it become more and more top of mind as people realize that the plant-based foods they're eating today don't necessarily have the nutrition credentials they expect. So that's something as an industry we're going to have to deliver on. But nutrition doesn't matter if taste isn't there first. I'm going to keep repeating that.
Yeah.
But we have to get nutrition right. So our portfolio, we're just starting to build a nutrition-focused portfolio, mainly around protein completion. So think about plant proteins that typically lack certain amino acids. We're figuring out ways to manage that, as well as other nutritional options. But I think we're going to see nutrition come to the forefront and will rival taste as a big must-have for consumers in a vocal way.
And all the rage right now too is precision nutrition. Is there like an interplay here with some of the stuff that's going on in that space?
Absolutely. I think the personalization of nutrition, microbiome science, right? And there are a lot of companies going after this kind of thing. I think the awareness and the urgency around nutritional wholeness will become a real hurdle for us to meet quickly.
That's amazing. So tell me what it's been like to be part of like raising capital in this environment. I mean, definitely, I've been working in the space of innovation and investment for the past decade, and it's been really exciting to see like the rise, this trajectory of like more interest in food and agri-tech. There was an unprecedented year of 36 billion of investment from VCs coming into the space in 2021. What's that journey been like for you? Do you see this continuing? There's been some obviously macro trends due to COVID and more interest into food systems. And so kind of tell me a little bit about the investment side.
Sure, it's been super exciting. I mean, from Motif's standpoint, we completed our Series B raise back in June of last year. We raised $226 million, which, for us provided a lot of resources for us to grow the company and continue developing great ingredients. But, it was my first experience with fundraising, so I learned a lot. I took a lot of notes, but it was exciting, and it gave me a window, and I think it sort of is indicative of the broader environment. There's so much interest and momentum behind this space, and Motif represents a very small fraction of the whole universe here, obviously. But I think that's still true. I think there's still quite a bit of capital that is waiting to come into the right investments. I think you're right. The interest rate environment and other factors have created a very different environment today versus a year ago. But I don't think that's changed the fundamental acknowledgement that the type of science and the type of consumer good that's being created here is a secular shift. It's really here to stay.
Yeah, absolutely. Do you guys have any comments on that, or?
Yeah, what I'll add is that, the venture group is, supposed to be risk capital. They generally are. But, if you look at the vehicle space, electric vehicles, just kind of providing the capital for that, when we look at ag, repeating what I said earlier, it takes 2 years to make a steak. Absolutely. And the technology that is used to make that steak has the same greenhouse gas footprint as a car. It's hugely inefficient. And so we need technology to address those issues and to create something that is more nutritious, that meets the experience that people are looking for when they're biting into a juicy steak or a piece of chicken. And, now the technology is there. And the capital has come to, yeah, exactly, to catalyze kind of the next wave of innovation. So.
And we were talking a little bit backstage too about the kind of phenomenon that we're also seeing around decentralization. And certainly in my experience, and I live in Europe, with the conflict going on right now, there's a lot of supply chain disruption, and people are saying, how can we localize production? How can we, take this forward? So you all have the chance to do that. Maybe you can explain a little bit about where you see the future of decentralized protein production. Jump on in, Eben.
I'm going to do a mushroom farm. So
Nice.
our goal is to use fermentation infrastructure that already exists, solid state fermentation infrastructure. So you might not realize this, but there's 3 billion pounds of the white button mushroom infrastructure installed worldwide, mostly Dutch systems. This is the mushroom you'd see in the supermarket. If you're thinking, oh, there's another mushroom at Portobello, same mushroom, they just grow it longer. So there's really one monocrop mushroom that are produced in all these farms. From day one, we've been designing our process to fit into this existing infrastructure. So we can produce locally, but we can also produce locally where existing CapEx is already deployed. That's definitely helpful in terms of our sort of model, in terms of the economic return. But it also just lets you scale faster because there's lots of local production sites that are already sited in food corridors that we think we can convert and use to grow my bacon and other whole cut meats.
Everywhere. That's amazing, yeah. What about you?
Yeah, and I'd say with our process, our main input is electricity. So and we use renewable power, which is becoming more and more abundant and lower cost. In fact, the lowest cost power now is wind energy. And so that macro trend is something that we want to latch onto. So that's the main input, as well as CO2 and oxygen and some other inputs as well. So that allows you to grow locally. and addresses things like food security, which just became a huge issue during
Yeah.
COVID. A lot of even the countries that are importing a lot of their foods, really hit that as a huge issue.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I actually just want to congratulate you because every time I'm hearing you talk, I just realize how systemic your solution is, like from the energy source, to thinking through the nutrition and going beyond. So that's, great to see. And we've talked about consumer acceptance. We talked about investment. We talked about technology. Let's talk about policy and regulation. Do you guys face some regulatory challenges and hurdles, or what's the landscape looking like there to bring these new disruptive solutions into the food system, which, as you pointed out so rightly, is so emotional and has, entrenched legacy systems built in, from farmers through to like what people tradition and cultures. So, yeah, how are you breaking through that, and are regulators and policymakers supporting or creating challenges for you?
I can start by saying, so we're bringing novel ingredients to the marketplace to make products, like to make our meat products. And so we have to go through the FDA process. GRAS is what we're going through, generally regarded as safe. And, we're checking all the boxes. So we haven't hit any roadblocks to date. And in fact, we've kind of completed all the studies that we needed to, and we're moving through that process. So no roadblocks.
That's awesome.
Yeah, I'd say it depends what market you want to sell into. So in the US, we actually were able to qualify for like a sort of self-grass because the cultivation, we're using the same strain of mushrooms that people have been eating for hundreds of years, right? The mycelium and the mushroom are basically chemically identical. And we're growing them in basically the same seed stocks in the same farms with like many modifications. And so in the US, we were actually able to do that. And that's why our product, My Bacon's been for sale for the past year, even in small quantities in upstate New York. In Europe, we are finding that is not the case. And so we are going through the sort of novel food acceptance criteria there now.
Interesting.
Yeah, similar in the U.S., I think the regulatory environment is pretty tractable and it's navigable. We received a GRAS non-object letter in December of last year for Hamami, so that process was very straightforward. I think that the point that Eben made is right, that getting back to this question around scale, the global regulatory environment is not so favorable for growth of these new technologies, and that's going to be a rate limiter for us as an industry eventually. But I think with enough consumer pull, and if we do a good job of educating regulators and bringing them into the ecosystem that we're building here, everyone's going to realize that to do more with less in a resource-constrained future, you need technologies like this. So that's a matter of time.
I saw you were recently at South by Southwest. So although you are a B2B player, are you doing some marketing to consumers to help, again, create that pull?
Well, I think that first of all, no one understands ingredient technology.
That's right.
No one gets it. Why would you?
Givaudan, maybe. Yeah.
But everyone understands great food, right? So I think the ability to connect with other human beings and with the investment community and with stakeholders, having food products is really important. And like I was talking about earlier at Motif, we take this holistic design approach to food as we develop our portfolio of B2B ingredients. It turns out that we actually developed some pretty good food products. And so we thought, why not take a crack at seeing how consumers like these? So we're very much B2B in terms of our core focus, but we believe that there's room for maybe showcase a few of the things that we've developed publicly. So.
I could imagine all of you could have so much fun going into schools and capturing people's imaginations early. You're nodding. Have you done that, or have
No,
you?
but I think it's a wonderful idea.
Yeah, because then they're great ambassadors to parents when kids can go in and say, "I tried this great product," and that's how you can create some kind of like culture change and new conversations for the future of food. So, in the last couple of minutes that we have up here, I would love to hear from each of you. What is next? What's coming up? What can we all look forward to? Besides, of course, trying the bacon at your stand, which I can't wait to. But yeah, tell us a little bit what's next.
Well, we're focused on scaling up production. So what doesn't exist in large volumes in the world today is air-based protein, and so that's what we need in order to make our air chicken and our air scallops and our air halibut in large volumes. So that's really what we're focused on, and that's what's next for us.
And how is scale up going? Because I've heard that is a bit of a limiting factor in the whole sector. Are the technologies available? And
so we've had to, redesign, and we've had to kind of come up with different solutions. We've leveraged our partners, their procurement, because of supply chain issues. So getting, steel and other things is a challenge, but we're navigating the challenge.
Awesome. And I've also heard, and if there's any innovators and entrepreneurs in the audience, I've heard that scale up technologies is a hot space to get into right now. So we need solutions. How about you? What's next?
I'd say the same thing, more bacon. So we're building the largest aerial mycelium farm in the world. One of this size has never been built in upstate New York right now. It'll produce a couple million pounds of our mycelium ingredient when it comes online later this year. And yeah, that's our focal point. On the product side, we do have another product the team's been going nuts with, just enjoying internally and eating a lot of. So my team told me not to talk about it today, so I'll just say it's a snackable.
Oh, snackable mushrooms.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, give those to the kids.
Yeah, from Motif standpoint, I mean, we're going beyond the original sort of meat and dairy scope that we had in mind, and you'll see some products coming out from us in that regard. Maybe stay tuned for some options in cheese. But even looking beyond the traditional categories, this notion of motivating the creation of new plant-based categories that aren't based on mimicry. I think that's what's next in general for the industry, as well as from us. Yeah.
Amazing. Okay, let's end with one word. What is your word of the day for the future food system? Lisa.
The word that I thought of was huge.
Huge.
It's gonna be huge.
Huge. You have a word?
I hate to do this, but I'm just going to go with it. Mushrooms.
Yes! Mush love.
I'm going to use two words. I'm going to say taste and interdependence.
Oh, I love that. Well, thank you so much for this very appetizing panel. I can't wait to try the bacon. Any questions, do come up to our speakers. And thank you all, and we'll see you here.
Oh my goodness, that was absolutely brilliant.